The Asia-Pacific region is a place where an estimated 300 million people with disabilities live.
For a half decade, the women with disabilities role will be very important to our situation and also 21st century.
一生懸命自分が自分を勝ってですね乗り越えて何でも努力をすればいつかは結果はあると思います。
To achieve the decade's goal, full participation and equality for the disabled people, concrete actions are taken in this region. The period 1993 to 2002 was proclaimed by United Nations ESCAP as the Asia and Pacific Decade of Disabled Persons. The campaign successfully reached the midpoint of the decade in 1997. In September 1997, commemorating the midpoint of the period, International Disabled Persons Conference was held in Seoul, Korea. This conference started with the joint opening ceremony of 3 different conferences of UN ESCAP, RI, Rehabilitation International, and RNN, Regional NGO Network for the Promotion of the Asian and Pacific Decade of the Disabled Persons. A sign chorus was performed by a mothers group wearing traditional Korean costume.
And we must seize upon this chance as an occasion to reaffirm or pledge ourselves to achieving the goals that are outlined by the ESCAP and all the goals that we commit ourselves to.
Legislation, information, public awareness, accessibility and communication, education.
On its own part, the Korean government has enacted the Welfare Act for the Disabled and has mounted a serious campaign to...
Meeting here in Seoul earlier this week made a number of important decisions, not least of which was the decision to establish a special task force on women and girls with disabilities.
Gone is the time of rhetoric. Now is the time for action.
At the end, there were 3 keynote speeches from these following people.
The government plans to construct a welfare network for the disabled population as we have ushered in an era of local autonomy. Also, the government emphasized contributions and voluntary services from the private sector and citizens.
If every man the man, the whole world would be mended. The healing of the world is in each nameless sails. Each separate star seemed nothing but myriad scattered stars break up the night and make it beautiful.
The purpose of this speech is to examine the concept of social integration and to ask the question whether disability sport and in particular the International Paralympic Committee, can play a role in the social integration of persons with a disability.
This joint opening ceremony was broadcast to Japan live for the first time by satellite transmission.
Last quarter century.
After the opening ceremony, many sectorial meetings on various kinds of topics started.
Legislation. Korea has pursued full equality and participation of the disabled by providing self-support.
As members of their societies, individual levels provide a new opportunity.
lesson for less favored. Services and facilities, others include sports, clubs, etc.
Over it now, they built a building. Thank you.
In fact, in many activities, the translation is not people with you. So if I have a support,
RNN had 9 different small meetings with their respective themes for 2 days. Let us show you some of them.
Awareness of Special Education Malaysia. Okay, on the 27th of September, I'll be major problem.
事故を確立できない知的障害の方々の無知恵術、無知恵術運動です。Why was I born? But through art.
After that, there was a plenary meeting in which the results of each sectorial meeting were reported. Run-up is a sort of reunion of members who have joined the leadership training program for disabled persons in developing countries organized by Japan International Cooperation Agency. Members from 12 countries assembled, and they talked about the experiences which they had in their countries after the program. Foundation Seminar was the highly motivated meeting which was for the first time held in this Seoul conference. Foundation Seminar was to discuss ways to support financially actions related to disabilities. Participants were Yasuda and Kirin Foundations of Japan and other private foundations of Korea, Philippines, Malaysia, and Hong Kong. The campaign 1907 and the joint reception party took place respectively.
Let me have pleasure to introduce you our representatives.
First of all, the flag of Asian Pacific was handed over from Korea to Hong Kong, which will host the next conference in '98. The poster commemorating the mid-year of the decade, which won the contest, was introduced. Open the Door in Our Hearts, which is the theme song of the Asian and Pacific Decade of Disabled Persons, was sung in English and Korean with sign languages. Korean traditional performances were held continuously, which captivated the audience. The conference, participated by 2,000 people, ended with a great success. We asked some people to tell us their impressions about the conference.
The first impression is, well, I have a wonderful experience to know well, a lot of friends, to make friends with them, and to understand what their difficulties, not only their experience, but also their difficulties in their own country.
And know there is somebody who is really the representative of women with disability in that team, so she can fight for her rights, you know, and for the needs that they have. And then I hope that it will be right.
The total number of persons with disabilities in Korea is estimated at around 1,050,000. Korea is now faced with new challenges to deal with many social and economic difficulties, just as other Asian countries do. The Employment Promotion Law of 1990 requires the employment quota of disabled persons at 2%, but only less than 9,000 people with disabilities are employed today. In this situation, especially people in non-governmental organizations are doing their best to support the life of disabled persons. Sonchewon, one of the most historical welfare facilities in Daejeon, Korea, is a comprehensive welfare facility which has many functions such as school, dormitory, hospital, and workshop.
小児舞が急に1962年代に、日本もそうだったんでしょうけども流行した。その時ご承知のようにあの時は韓国はね1人当たりの GNP がね80ドルぐらいしか1人当たり。そういう貧しい時だったからもうみんな治療の方法もないしお金もないでしょ、ワクチンもない。だから病気になれば貧しい人たちが多くかかったんで道の方へこう掘っ返して掘り出していくんですよ。私のうちに7名の、捨てられた身寄りのない子どもたちを小児舞の友達を連れて、始めたのが最初の、施設の始まりなんです。
Mr. Sin Jong-ho, who is the member of Bethesda Quartet, which performed at the joint opening ceremony, graduated from Sonchewon.
一般の学校行くことができなかったから大田にある清々生活院というところで勉強したんですよ。その時にその学校で趣味でファイリングを始めて習ったんですね。その後その音楽が好きになってずっとやってたんですけど、やっぱりその 障害を持ってる人は普通時計を昔はですね時計を直したりいろんな仕事というのは限りがあってですねその道がすごく狭かったんですね。
Mr. Singh continued to study music for 30 years. Then his dream came true. He's now teaching at music college in Seoul. Many of the graduate students made their own companies or succeeded in an enterprise of the tools for disabled people. Their junior colleagues are studying with their bright possibilities.
이제 성세재활원의 오늘날을 보면은 여러 가지 시설이 한 군내에 이렇게 있습니다. 보시다시피 학교도 있고 재활원도 있고 병원도 있고 또 장애자 공장도 있고 또 건물들은 보시는 것 같이 상당히 좋은 이런 형태를 이렇게 갖추고 있습니다. 그러나 이제는 외형적인 것보다도 내용적인 것이 문제가 되고요. 그 다음에는 이제부터는 한 사람 한 사람의 요구에 어떻게 어프로치 해 나가느냐. 그래서 그들이 그야말로 만족할 수 있게끔 이렇게 그들의 원하는 바를 우리가 채워주느냐. 이것이 금후 21세기는 양보다도 질을 중점으로 한 이런 것이 되어야 되지 않겠냐 이렇게 생각합니다.
At Chonrip Kwekwan, they are helping the people with disability for their independence or participation in the community. In this electronic parts factory, they make TVs, computer monitors, some parts of audio system, and 85% of the workers here are disabled.
We have very different peoples with a different background, even different types of disabilities. So most impending problem was how to make them unite together.
This is their warehouse where seriously disabled people work. This seminar on computer is so popular that it is booked by the people who want to join until several months ahead. They can examine cars for disabled people for free.
우리가 보통 장애인 시설이라고 그러면은 장애인들만이 그 시설을 이용하는 걸로 이렇게 잘못 생각하는 사람들이 간혹 있습니다. 저는 우리가 완전한 사회 참여를 지금 갈망하고 있다면은 먼저 우리가 일반인들을 우리 그 시설에 같이 수용을 해서 함께 살아가는 그런 모습을 터득해야 되지 않나 이런 취지에서 우리 수용장도 일반인들에게 그 장애인들이 쓰지 않는 시간을 이용해서 공개를 하고 있습니다.
This gymnasium was used for Paralympics. Now that the targets of the decade have been set up and issues of higher priority within the region have become concrete, it has become easier for each government of the region to come up with its own agenda for action for the decade. As we enter into the latter half of the decade, each government is urged to take concrete steps towards their implementation.
Not only conduct long-term training programs, we have to come out with short-term workshops, seminars.
We have to continue our effort as much as we can. Not for the disabled, not to the disabled, rather with the disabled.
You and I have great responsibility to bring full and equal participation to these disabled persons. each and every one of us can and must make a difference.
To improve the quality of life of persons with disabilities is to also improve the whole society. The Asian and Pacific Decade of Disabled Persons is for everybody. That means this is your decade too. The annual conference is routinely held in each member country. To promote a barrier-free society in the region, let us all unite our efforts